Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, as we were all tasked individually with putting together our top 5 toughest schedules and our top 5 easiest schedules. Now, there was one team that, according to producer Mikey, has shown up on all of ours. So I think that would be an interesting way to start. So DK, let's go with your top 5, and we'll dig in on your number 1 here early on in the proceedings. So why don't you unveil our
toughest or easiest or both?
Tough. No, just toughest for
toughest. All right, just toughest. Now, I had a little bit of a different take on this. When I determined toughest, one of the things I was looking for was how many Power 5 opponents you're playing. Like, and if you played 4 Power 4, because there was some that I saw on a lot of lists that still had like 3 easy and it just, to me, I wanted to see who you're playing out of conference, what types of games you're playing. So I had for the number 1 toughest, it's come up in a bunch. I don't know if it'd be number 1 on yours, but Wisconsin. We talked about it last year with such a tough schedule. Once again, playing Alabama, this time on the road for Luke Fickell. And then the in-conference slate is not much kinder to them. I don't have it up here in front of me. I'm trying to get it here up for me if Mikey keyed it up there. But I had Wisconsin on the list at number 1 for me.
All right. So for Wisconsin, here's what I've got in my notes. Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Illinois, plus at Indiana. Now, I don't think Indiana is going to be a preseason top 25 team, but they could sneak in there based on how the voters behave. But with Alabama in there as well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 top 25 teams, according to the preseason poll. And who knows what they would do with Iowa as well. I'm with you on Wisconsin. I've got Wisconsin at number 2 on mine. So look, Miami, Ohio is a championship contender in the MAC. They are
right.
Like, they are not going to be an easy pushover. You mentioned the road trip to Alabama. This is one where in a season, and we find this so often, and we will have this also here in this conversation today. We were like, Luke Fickell, a lot of pressure on you, man. This is what you gotta. This is the year you got to show some improvement, generate some confidence. Here's the schedule. It is one of the toughest in the country. So, DK, you're 1. I'm with you. I think that this is a brutal slate where you get some of the toughest team. The only real Penn State power that they dodge is Penn State, right?
Yeah, and like we talk about the big 4 teams that are on the schedule: the Alabama, Michigan, Oregon, and Ohio State. 3 of those games are on the road. Yeah. But even when you get past like Indiana and Illinois, who are going to start ranked, it's like, oh, okay, so the breaks are Iowa, Washington, at Minnesota. Like, it's a really difficult trip from start to finish. Like, they should be 3-1 to start the year, and then hell will be unleashed upon them. I had them 4th, by the way, on mine.
I had this 3rd. Like, I think we all agree this is like decisively a top 5 most difficult schedule in the country.
1-8 in conference play. A decent Wisconsin team could go 1-8 in conference play against this.
It's not out of the realm. No.
What do they have a single game after the first 2 weeks where they are a double-digit favorite?
No.
Maryland.
No.
They could be a double-digit favorite over Maryland.
Maybe.
But I'm not going to guarantee it. But no, it's tough as hell. If they go 6-6, most like fans who aren't paying super close attention will probably be pissed and want Fickell to be fired. But honestly, if this team goes 6-6 after all the changes they made during the offseason, I'd be like, all right, cool. We're heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
It's so tough to be able to sell, to be able to, that is a tough thing to be able to sell to a fan base like Wisconsin. So it'll be fascinating here. All right, DK, why don't you take us to your? Let's see. You had
number 2. I had the Oklahoma Sooners. Non-conference. Their out of conference is pretty light. I mean, again, SEC teams, I did ding some of them for only playing 8 conference games, and depending on their non-conference. But even hosting against Michigan, I think that's a tough one for them. And then the road games. At South Carolina, at Tennessee, at Alabama aren't exactly easy, especially that final month of the season. Hosting Texas, Auburn's supposed to be better. I know we hear that, often, but hosting Missouri, who was, again, double-digit win team last year, I had Oklahoma up there for me as the second hardest in the country.
I had them 6th or 7th. But again, one that I think was a very difficult cut. I do think that it is worth noting just how bad 3 of the 4 non-conference games are. This is not knocking this. I'm just saying, like,
Temple,
reality.
Kent State, and Illinois.
You get 2 bye weeks, and you also get 3. Like, Temple and Kent State are both easily bottom 5 teams in the FBS, and are real underdogs to the good FCS teams. So you're essentially like Oklahoma could play all of its backups and still win both those games easily. So I do think they get significant rest on this schedule, right? But
though not in
and he's been
play.
dusty pilled.
That's right.
But and Oklahoma is not on my top 5, but I agree. Obviously, I mean, it's extremely tough schedule, especially when you've got Michigan on there in the non-con. But they in conference play, they don't get a breather. Like of the teams that we expect to be at the bottom of the SEC, what's the most manageable conference game that they've got? Is it Auburn at home?
Probably Missouri at home or Auburn.
Yeah.
Or Ole Miss at home.
Those are tough games.
They are tough games. This did not make my top 5, and one of the reasons it didn't is because, I mean, outside of Alabama and Tennessee, like, those are your only real difficult road games, and we don't know how good Tennessee is going to be. Tennessee might not be very, so
South Carolina might be tough.
Yeah, but like a lot of those tough games are at home. So again, I'm not saying it's an easy schedule, but this is kind of why it didn't make my top 5, kind of just cutting it off there. And also, as Bud mentioned, Temple and Kent State.
Okay.
And like we'll get look, honestly, I think like 4 through 8 for me was very interchangeable.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad we have different ones because it promotes debate.
Right. All right, DK, what was your 3? I think you're on an island for 3.
You didn't like this one. You guys didn't see this one coming up. I had Purdue on the slate.
Just because they're Purdue, so every single game is impossible.
You guys probably just wrote them off saying, does it really even matter? But they do catch some of the top tier teams, both Michigan, both Ohio State. At Washington's not either. Again, Indiana, Illinois, 2 of those teams that are right under that tier and might even be playing for a playoff spot. And then the non-conference road game against Notre Dame, catching USC as well. It just seemed like to me they were catching a lot of the teams from that, upper echelon of the Big Ten. I mean, they're an underdog in almost every game. I know they're non-conference at the Ball State and Southern Illinois start isn't fantastic. It looks like a beast.
Yeah, I think when you grade on the curve of Purdue and then you look at that schedule, they're going to be like double-digit dogs damn near every single week. It is going to be a long season for the Boilermakers and Barry Odom, but
But if we don't grade them on a curve, there's no Oregon, there's no Penn State.
But there's Michigan and Ohio State in back-to-back weeks. You got USC, Notre Dame, Illinois in 3 consecutive games. Like, there's some really tough stretches. Yeah, you get the Northwestern Rutgers break. You get the Ball State, Southern Illinois, which is why this would not be near my top 5, let alone 3. But I get it.
If you wanted to make like a top 10 list, I would hear an argument for this being like honorable mention for a top 10 list. Top 5, it seems a little out there, but I get it. I just getting Northwestern and Rutgers and Minnesota, and I'm not trying to lump Minnesota in with Northwestern and Rutgers. I do think they're better than those teams.
All right, let's get to one we can be more agreeable on.
Florida.
My 4 is Florida,
the
Gators, which I'm sure this is almost on everybody's. It was talked a lot about.
Did anybody not have this one?
What's that?
Than Danny? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't have Florida in my top 5.
What?
Whoa!
I had him 1 with a bullet.
I got him 1.
Yeah. All right, let's hear this. This is good podcasting.
I'm more curious to hear Chip's take on why they're not in there. I thought I was dinging them being Bob. Thought I was going to get called.
Chip's got no respect for the Long Island University Sharks.
Wait, you mean you were correct. I have no respect for the Long Island University Sharks. I mean, so let's go through this non-con. All right. Long Island University. I mean, that's just an easy win. South Florida, that's going to be good. I mean, they're going to go down to play Bad Vibes Beck. Are you kidding me? Like that is going to be an easy win for DJ Lagway. That's like the difference in quarterback play is worth a touchdown at least. And then you play the Noles at the end of the season on your home turf. I mean, that's a 4-0 non-conference schedule. And I just think that when I was going through everyone on my top 5 has a non-conference game that I'm chalking up as a loss, and I've got Florida 4-0 in non-con play.
Wow. Can we bet that? Can we do one little side bet?
I'll think they won't go 4-0 in non-con play.
Little side action.
I mean,
so they only have 6 home games.
Yeah.
Which I think is tough. Also, I think if you swap some of these home and aways, it gets easier. And I did this from the perspective of like a top 20-ish type team trying to make the playoff, because I thought that's why we're bringing this up, because there's been all this strength of schedule talk recently with the playoff stuff. There's so many losable games. Like you'd rather play Mississippi State on the road because they suck and you'd beat them on the road. But like, I don't really want to go to Ole Miss. I don't really want to go, like, even though I don't think Kentucky's any good, like I'd rather like that's an annoying one to have to go play right after the Georgia game, at LSU, at Miami, at A&M. Every road game is very losable for this thing. You get Texas and Georgia, which is certainly tough.
Right.
Florida State will probably be like, yeah, but not terrible. I think. Tennessee, we'll have to see. I just like that non-conference is wild, and only the 6 home games. I had them number 1 by a lot.
Do you know what's what's really problematic and embarrassing for me? They have almost the exact same schedule from a strength of schedule as my number 1, which is just another SEC team. Like as I'm going through and I'm gonna make my case. I'm gonna be like, they've got to play Georgia and Texas and Tennessee. Those were all college football playoff teams last year. They've got to play Ole Miss and Texas A&M. Those are teams that were knocking on the door of the SEC title race.
Sounds familiar. Yeah, yep. I think if you look at this schedule, like it's not unrealistic that Florida could go 3-3 at home with the teams that they've got to play in Gainesville.
Well, they lost at home to Miami last year, and they lost another home game.
That's what I'm saying. They could go 3-3 at home, and then they've got road games at LSU, Miami, A&M, Georgia's neutral, Ole Miss on the road. Like this is a tough schedule.
Even if they go 4-2 at home, they're still kind of screwed.
Yeah,
because of having to go to LSU, A&M, and Ole Miss.
If you go 4-2 at home, I'd be shocked if you are better than 2-4 away from home.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on Florida here? Wait, this was a good question earlier.
They also could be 2-2 for the first month of the season.
Yep.
And then you wonder, and they kept it together. They battled. They started off rough last year, kept battling. They just wonder. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, Danny, and then you've got Rutgers as your 5th. I think you're in
another one. I guess I didn't get the memo on the college football playoff teams making a run. Like their schedule was pretty brutal for Greg Schiano and company to try to get out of that mid-tier level of the Big Ten.
It was certainly in the running for mine. Yeah. I mean, look at that back half of the schedule.
The last 4 games might be the most brutal stretch of anybody, and that's after going on the road to Washington and playing Oregon at home.
No break. You're in Seattle on Saturday night playing Washington, and you've got to be back in Piscataway to play Oregon 7 days later.
Yep.
Gracious.
They did them no favors. No favors. You could have spread those games out a little bit more.
Ohio State and Penn. I mean, they are
back-to-back weeks.
This is no one was considering Rutgers when they made this schedule. And Rutgers just caught all the leftovers. Like, okay,
Mikey, take a note for me.
Last year was like the 12 months no interest.
Yes.
They gotta pay.
Mikey, take a note for me. We're going to take a Penn State alt line on that November 29th game because Rutgers is probably going to be in some bad shape.
Yeah, end of the season coming out of Columbus. That's gonna be no bueno. So everyone agrees on that one. Rutgers definitely one of the toughest in the country. All right, Tom, why don't you steer the ship here? We know you've got Florida as your number 1. Let's keep it rocking.
Yeah, I've got Florida at number 1. Don't really need to go any further into that, I guess. At number 2, I've got Texas. They've got to play, their typical SEC schedule, which is difficult on its own. But then, let's start the season with a road game at Ohio State. And I think that you can argue their non-con of San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston is toss away, and I get that, and I would toss it away. but you're on the road for Ohio State. You're on the road for Florida. You're going to be on the road for Georgia. And then you've got you got the neutral site game against Oklahoma. There's Vandy, there's Arkansas. Like, it's a difficult schedule for a team that, when you look at how things went last year, 3 lost teams were left out of the college football playoff, 3 lost SEC teams. This is a team that's coming in. We're talking about it as maybe it is the favorite to win the national title. There's a lot of room for error, or there's not much room for error here. There's a lot of games that this team could lose, especially if Arch Manning doesn't come out and isn't great right away. Like, they could get killed by Ohio State. They could lose on the road to Florida. They probably will lose on the road to Georgia based on what we saw them playing Georgia last year. So they've got to be perfect in a lot of pretty difficult games.
Completely agree. Yeah. I mean, at Florida now, I do like that too. If you're going to defend this, does everybody have them in the top 5?
No,
right?
no.
I did not.
Chip does not.
Yeah,
Danny doesn't either.
I mean, they do play 3 or 4 of the worst teams in the SEC.
When you're looking for what you're looking for and what you want on your schedule and what you're looking to avoid, obviously Texas can't play themselves, so then you avoid one thing, and then you're also scooping up some of the teams that we project to be from the bottom, including road trips to Kentucky and Mississippi State, where talent alone means your B- game means you're probably not going to get tripped up. Famous last words, clip it, I know, but
I see a lot of people saying that, like, Texas has the bottom quarter of the SEC on their schedule. So I should include a team from the Big 10, Big 12, or ACC who also have bottom half teams from their leagues on there. The bottom quarter of the SEC is better than the bottom of most of the other leagues.
We would not have had Texas in this thing last year because they did not have that huge at Ohio State on there. But like,
that carries a lot of weight.
That in. Like,
but that much weight, that's where I would push back and say, I get it's one, and it's going to be a tough game, and it's against national champion and caliber and all that. I just don't think it adds that much weight. And like some of this, like, we watched the game against Florida last year, right? Like, they didn't even play anybody. And
Florida had the Yale kid starting quarterback.
Yeah, Florida didn't have anybody playing.
It was when Lagway did the hamstring thing. Yeah, I think this is the second type of schedule. I had it. Tom and I are in agreement 1, 2, maybe 3. I don't know. Well, no, I have Wisconsin 3. You had Wisconsin 4?
I had Wisconsin 4th, yes.
Look, I totally agree. Like, the Vandy, Mississippi State, Kentucky stretch is a great stretch to potentially get healthy middle of the season, plus the bye week there. But
yeah, Arkansas at the end of the season too, before you go into A&M.
What other – everybody would have Texas as the top 5 power-rated team, right?
Oh, top 3.
Okay, sure. What other top 3 power-rated team has a schedule where you're an underdog 3 times?
Thank you.
Or potentially an underdog. Like, you could be a dog at Florida, dog at Ohio State, dog at Georgia.
Fair.
Like, that's wild.
Or you could be a 9.5-point favorite against Florida by the time that game is played.
If I would say only if Lagway's hurt, or you laying, close to 10 in the swamp. But yeah, I mean, that's fair.
And we don't know how good Texas A&M is going to be, and you got to finish the year with them.
Like, there's probably 10 teams out there that you can make a really good argument should be top 5, which is what makes this fun. I didn't have Purdue on that, but I'm willing.
Our good friend Gregory Sankey. Gregory has taken note of us praising Texas's schedule for when they're 9-3 and knocking on the door for an at-large. So I'm sure,
but only because of the Ohio State game,
right?
Like, last year, they had the gift of all gifts scheduled to start the SEC schedule, or to start their SEC voyage.
Okay, and then what's your Tom?
I had Vandy at 3.
Vandy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This is my Purdue, I guess, Danny. Me putting Vandy in here, but no, I think that this is just genuinely like a difficult schedule for the Commodores. They get Virginia Tech on the road in non-con, which is, they should. I think there's a good chance that they can win that game, but it's tough. It's Virginia Tech on the road.
Are they favored?
Probably by a point or 2 at most, I would think. You get South Carolina on the road, Alabama's on the road, Texas is on the road, Tennessee's on the road. Like, that's a very difficult road schedule. And then at home, you got Georgia State and Utah State, but they lost to Georgia State last year. So let's not just assume they're going to win that game. Then you got LSU, Mizzou, Auburn, and Kentucky. I think that you look at the top of this schedule, it is a very, very difficult schedule for Vanderbilt to be dealing with. And I think that it's one of the tougher ones in the schedule, or in the country, which is why I had it at number 3.
I had that on my honorable mentions list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got no, outside of Kentucky, you got no game that feels like, okay, this is going to be the one to make sure that we end up kind of in the muddied middle of that standings. Like when I think about the SEC, if you're not competing for the championship, you just want to make sure that you're not down there in the 2 and 6 part of thing. Cause those are where it really starts to get at fans. You want to give yourselves a crack at 3 and 5, 4 and 4, 5 and 3, kind of get up into that muddied middle, not look like you're in the basement. You don't get it. They're going to have to go out there and earn it. Go out there and earn it, likely at home with those, Missouri, Auburn, Kentucky, those kind of games right there. Who knows? Go and knock off your in-state rivals there. All right. So Tom, you had Wisconsin at 4. We already discussed that. You had Arkansas at 5. Let's go through the Hogs. I actually do have the Hogs on my list.
Me too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty simple to me. Like you just non-conference, not that difficult, I guess, except Notre Dame.
Memphis.
Yeah, Notre Dame's in there. Damn. Oh, gee golly. Then you've got Memphis, who will probably be one of the teams competing for the G5 spot. You've got them on the road. You've got to play Ole Miss on the road. You've got to play Tennessee, a team that was in the playoff last year, on the road. LSU's on the road. Texas is on the road. You get A&M at home. Missouri is a team that has been one of the better teams in the SEC on an annual basis for a while now. Mississippi State at home is a gimme. Auburn, they probably should win. But other than that, like you look at this schedule, how confident are you Arkansas is going 6 and 6?
Dude, not at all.
No.
Yeah. So.
Here was my note here. Conservatively, and this is counting Memphis, there are 6 teams on this 12-game schedule who have legitimate college football playoff hopes.
Hopes aren't reality, though. That's why I'm getting a little bit.
Well, do you think that LSU, do they have college football playoff hopes?
Definitely.
Yes.
Does
Texas
Tennessee
does?
Texas, Texas is obvious. Notre Dame's obvious. Ole Miss has college football playoff hopes.
Yes, so does A&M.
A&M has a college football playoff hopes.
So does Memphis.
Let's pull up Purdue's schedule and we can talk ourselves into some of those playoff hopes conversation. There's a lot of hope on these lists. Jeez. I think Tom's is he leaving us for the SEC network? This list is pretty heavy.
My schedule's based on my own power ratings. And
did you see what FBI had?
Oh gosh.
Yes, I did. I referenced a couple different strength of schedule objective metrics to like get my initial player pool together, essentially. And the FBI was the most SEC pilled stuff I've ever seen. I think
next to Tom's list of tough schedules.
But it's, not to
15 of the top 16 are SEC according to ESPN's FBI.
Not to ruin the tease here, but look, some of my most of my toughest schedules are SEC and Big 10. Most of my easiest schedules are ACC and Big 12.
Yeah, crazy how that works.
Yeah, exactly. I had Arkansas 5, by the way. That's a really, really difficult schedule. Now they do get the A&M game at home this year. Like that's not one of those Jerry World things anymore, which is notable. But that's brutal.
Hey, you want to talk about make a note? At Memphis is a spot, like that is a sandwich spot of sandwich spots coming out of Ole Miss when the buzz around Fayetteville of the Notre Dame game is going to be through the roof.
Why would we? So Jim No in the chat says this whole combo is why USC doesn't want to play Notre Dame anymore. You guys don't respect it.
No, we are
huge respect it.
We are overly respecting it.
Notre Dame was the differentiator why I had Arkansas in and Oklahoma out.
Yeah,
I had Purdue on the list.
Better than Michigan to me.
Yeah. Okay, Bud. I know we've gotten through a couple of yours already. Let's get the 1 through 5 on the screen. Let you read it for those who are listening at home.
Ooh, there's a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of matching. Again, I think for the most part, we're drawing from like the same 10, 11, 12, 13-ish teams here to go. The one outlier, if you're listening on podcast, I had Florida, Texas, Wisconsin, UCLA, Arkansas. So we'll go to the one outlier here that we had with UCLA. And, man, this just looks tough as hell to me. I think if you're using some of these computer models, they're not probably factoring in, like, Utah having a quarterback.
Right.
But I'm a human model, so I am, right? And like
UNLV being like you cannot just look at UNLV as an easy G5 at all.
So you only get 6 home games, okay? You have to play Penn State. You have to play at Indiana, at what is probably an improved Michigan State team. Utah to open, I think, is really, really tough. Nebraska at home should be an improved Nebraska team. At Ohio State, Washington, at USC. Also, the travel here does factor in for me. I like that is a lot of trips to Eastern time zone and Central time zone, which is, I think that starts to eat on you a little bit. So I think this is a really, really difficult schedule. And I had it fourth.
I had them. I broke down a whole segment of them, ended up replacing it. So I guess I would say they finished sixth. I totally agree with you on the Utah. UNLV is a tough non-con. There's no Michigan, there's no Oregon. So you do if we're splitting hairs here, but still, the travel can make up for that for sure. They traveled more miles than anybody else in the country last year. They will be among the top 5 in terms of distance traveled this year with something like that.
Also, Northwestern is probably a good bit improved this year, given that they have a quarterback as well.
UCLA's got a quarterback.
They do.
Okay, I can run through mine quickly, so we've got a little bit of time for easiest. My top 5. I've got Mississippi State at 1. Again, this is the one where I read I read all of the reasons that you had listed out when I realized that Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, those are my reasons for Mississippi State. They are also very valid reasons elsewhere. They've got the reigning Big 12 champs, Arizona State, in non-con. That's not easy. And also on my notepad, they can't play themselves. And that when Florida and Arkansas are your most winnable games, and both of those games are on the road in terms of SEC play, not a great outlook for the Bulldogs right there. I've got Wisconsin at my number 2. We already mentioned that. Arkansas is my number 3. Now let's talk about the Syracuse Orange, all right?
Yes.
Oh, that's
the only ACC team that came close to my top 5.
I can't believe I missed them. Wait,
yeah.
Chip.
All right. So Syracuse has the most brutal non-conference schedule in the Atlantic Coast Conference, because not only are you playing Tennessee in a quote-unquote neutral site game, not only are you going to have to play Notre Dame in South Bend, well, buddy, you got UConn. And I don't know if y'all been keeping tabs on UConn, but Jim Moore Jr.'s got the boys playing ball. Okay, we're talking about the Fenway Bowl champs right there that are going to be coming to town trying to make some noise against a retooled and reworked Syracuse roster. You get into conference play, Clemson, SMU, Miami. My top tier of the ACC is those 3 teams plus Louisville. So when you're drawing 3 out of the top 4 there, that's going to be a little bit tougher. And then an absolute absence of the teams in the ACC where you might feel like you can just sort of step on the field, not have your best stuff, not be totally healthy, and get out of there. That's Virginia. That's Wake Forest. That's Stanford. That's Cal. None of those 4 teams are showing up on this. So am I calling, your Boston College, your Georgia Tech, your Pitt, North Carolina? Am I calling those the world beaters? No, but the teams that I consider to be at the bottom of the league, all absent, brutal non-con. Tough conference draw. I've got Syracuse as my number 4.
Yeah, completely agree. This is very similar to Rutgers. Last year, Syracuse's schedule was an absolute gift to Fran Brown, and we knew this was coming back around. If Nico was still in Tennessee, you might have Syracuse 3.
Maybe. And then finally, for my toughest, I've got the South Carolina Gamecocks. A little bit of a late addition here in the process. But I was looking at it, and South Carolina avoids Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee. 3 teams from the SEC that made the college football playoff last year. Not here. Virginia Tech and Clemson. South Carolina are going to be a favorite against Virginia Tech, I expect, in that opener. But I think that they are going to be an underdog against Clemson, even with that game being at home at the end of the season. Look, your quote-unquote, you've got South Carolina State up in as your FCS opponent up in the early spot. The FCS slot of Coastal Carolina, you can't play all backups against the Chants in that game. You got to at least show up, tie your shoes, and be ready to play some ball. So that whole right column, as you're looking at, take it all the way to LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. Coastal is how you catch your breath and then finish it against Clemson. I think the Gamecocks have a pretty tough schedule.
Yeah, but they don't play Tennessee, so they don't have to worry about that power T.
That's good. Good point.